Alright, there it is. The button has appeared. I'm not gonna try and check to make sure the stream's working this time, because every single time I've checked lately it's been actually working, so I'm just gonna trust YouTube on this one. Yeah, so today's plan is gonna be a bit unusual. I don't have a plan, so the plan is to find the plan and then maybe work on stuff for an hour or two. So I'm thinking there's probably, I don't remember what it was. I think there was some stuff I had to fix because I added like the portal areas or whatever, where you hit the circle and then you go down a layer. So there's stuff that needs to be handled with that. So like, first of all, I need to see how this looks when like another car comes through here. So I'm gonna drive back here. I bet the items don't, or maybe the items would work properly, but I think at a minimum I'll need to, I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to think about that. I seem to recall thinking that I would have to split up how, like how the items follow the different, what would be the different checkpoints? Oh, something I know I need to do. I need to make sure that the checkpoints, actually what it was that the checkpoints need to have a layer associated with them, so that the like when you run off at the edge or something, it puts you back on, I guess, the correct layer. Because for example, if you run off the edge, but then the nearest checkpoint is for some reason on a different layer, and it just keeps spawning you in a place that doesn't have any road, you just get stuck. So that's not ideal. I think it's unlikely to happen as long as the checkpoints are set up properly, but... Oh, so here's another thing that has to be fixed. The, okay, well, there's that. Wait, is that a shortcut? Where am I? Okay, so there's some stuff that definitely has to be fixed there. Where did I come from? So I came from... I'm not sure why it put me there. Should have put me over here. I think I need to, yeah, reevaluate some of the checkpoints. Probably just redo all the checkpoints on this map. Yeah, so the first thing though is that the players can see the players on different levels, so I need to isolate that and network that part. So I thought I did, but maybe I didn't. I think maybe the layers shared and then I didn't actually filter the rendering based on that. So that's the first thing I gotta fix. Then I gotta fix the checkpoints. What else is there? I do need to get the item boxes going on this map so that I can check if the rockets work. I think they actually might work because the rockets will see the whole track as one path. The only thing I can think of is that maybe where the layers intersect, where there would be an intersection across layers, but not on an individual layer, the rocket might get confused because it might think, oh, I'm at the, I see I'm really close to this player here, but even though I'm not on the right layer, and then maybe it'll stop there and start spinning in circles or something because it thinks that it should be able to hit the player from there. So I might have to update the rocket AI, but I think that actually might almost work as is. There might not have to be a whole lot to do there. And then I could also do some visual effects stuff, it seems. So I guess that is the plan. So first thing is the visibility problem, where you can see players on different layers. That's not good. Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and kill these. I have not worked on Pixkartz much lately because I was rushing to get some specific stuff done with Yanok, which By the way, I will show Yanok right now. I just updated, wait, oops. Let me double check and make sure that there's no sensitive information here. I don't think there is. Yeah, I don't think there's any. I think they should be fine. Hang on. Alright. So I just updated the Yanok store page. I also specified the quarter of the release date, because before I think it just said 2024. So I actually specified the quarter, and then I'm hoping to narrow it down to the month soon. Maybe this weekend, maybe next weekend. I'm hoping within the next couple weeks, like possibly even today, I might be able to narrow this down a little bit more, the release date. But yeah, been doing a lot of stuff with Yanok, so you should go wishlist that if you're interested in that. So there's that. But yeah, so Pixkartz was put off for a little bit because I needed to make a certain amount of progress by a certain point on Yanok, but I'm hoping to slowly get back into doing it more. The only issue is that it seems that for live streams, you guys tend to like Yanok way more than Pixkartz. Mostly and reasonably because a lot of the stuff I have to do for Pixkartz is like the later stuff in game development where you're doing artwork and stuff like that, so it's kind of boring. Anyways, this is going to be one of the infrequent Pixkartz coding streams, though. Now you guys just finished the platformer tutorial? Nice. I'm curious, I should have the statistics. I want to see, wait, I've got my phone right here. I'm going to pull it up. Not very many people actually get through the whole thing. Let's see what the statistics are. Where is it? There it is. Engagement, I think it is. Ah, yes. Let's see what portion of people watch the whole video. Okay, so 1%. So we're looking at about, what would it be? 3,000 people. Well, I think it's rounding down because it's mostly 2%. And it slightly dips to 1% at one point. So it's probably maybe like 1.4 or something like that. So 3,000 or 4,000 people maybe have actually made it through that whole tutorial, which is funny because that's almost nothing compared to the actual view count on that thing. Nested if statements? What? Where? What's wrong with... There's nothing wrong with nested if statements. I mean, some of these you could convert to and a lot of times I do. Although there's a reason why you would want it nested like this for code quality purposes, is because, for example, if this is gating a bunch of different things and you want to add another feature here, and it would be like if you're, this is the item box, but if you wanted to do something like you're within 32 pixels, you do something else. It's nicer for extending it like that when you have nested like that instead of writing and. But there are, like, a lot of times case by case, I'll choose it based on how likely I think I am to need more cases under it. Like the if self.car thing is just ensuring that the player actually has a car that's spawned which is actually what's used to gate a lot of things here. So like here's where I use an AND, but yeah. Oh, just generally, I don't use ANDs too often because I think I find that most of the times I do it, I end up having to break apart the statement anyways at some point. So, yeah, the nesting doesn't bother me too much because my screen's pretty wide. Oh wait, also I forgot I need to zoom in. I normally zoom in for my streams. But yeah, some of these statements get pretty wide. I completely ignore any line width rules because I've got a 1440p monitor. And when I'm at this zoom, I can see plenty. So I don't, since I'm the only one writing the code, if it, like, well, that one's a bit long, but normally I don't really care. I just keep writing. A line is a line. Yeah. Reading chat, by the way. You want to get into OG but you don't like the formatting. By OG, are you referring to the original Pygame tutorial? I'm not sure what you're talking about. Because the original Pygame tutorial has, it was intentionally made without object-oriented programming to make it easier to understand for newer people. You don't like long lines because they're hard to read and understand later? Yeah, well, so the reason I don't like breaking apart lines is because it makes it harder to find things later, because when you start breaking apart your lines, your code gets a lot longer vertically. So you can fit a lot more logic on your screen if you've got lines going off the screen. So, or generally if you're using more of the space array here. So like if you look at this block of code here, like pretty much the whole screen space is used, so you can see there's a lot of logic in here. Although a lot of this is really bad code. I was just copy pasting stuff and modifying numbers. But that's what you do. I do that a lot with UI code, is because nothing's depending on UI code, and it's just for visuals. It's the endpoint. You don't need to have super high quality code there. So I'll like copy paste stuff all the time when I'm doing UI. So, and then I can get away with it. But generally, let me see if I got a better example. I guess the car is something where there's not UI code. So the code's a little bit nicer in here. Oh, and you can see I do break apart these lines here, but generally speaking, I use large portions of my actual screen space, which means that I can see more logic going on at once, basically. Especially when I'm at this zoom, I can see a lot going on at once. There's a lot of code in here. The car is surprisingly complicated. Well, a lot of this code is kind of not necessary. I could reduce it, because a lot of it is side effects of the fact that this project went a lot further than I originally expected. But yeah, just generally the whole idea is you can see a lot. It helps me work faster, basically. I can see how for other people you would work slower than if you used this everywhere, where you break it apart like that. Can I explain how to use Pygame draw.polygon? I guess I don't have a tutorial on that. I don't have a tutorial on most of the draw functions, I guess. Never really did one on that, now that I think about it. But they're not difficult to use. If you pull up the documentation, they give you the arguments, and you can just kind of play with it until you figure out how it works. Have I tried experimenting with 3D? Yes, you can look at... I have another stream recently I think you can look at, and then also my latest video. Usually you find your variables super literally and then control F to find them. Or name your variables super literally. Well, when you have thousands of variables, you're probably not going to remember all the names. Although I do remember a lot of them off the top of my head, and then I do search for them, so that does happen a lot. But it's not very reliable, and a lot of times I remember more about where some code was, roughly, rather than the exact name of like a variable. So I guess in that sense, I'm not very detail oriented because I tend to remember rough details rather than specifics about things. So just remembering broadly where something is a lot. I don't know. Works better. This works better with that style of thinking, I guess. Do I worry about memory leak much with Pygame? Does it ever change how you implement things? I mean, you don't want to implement a memory leak. You can implement memory leaks by just having like throwing stuff into an array and never removing it. And it does happen sometimes accidentally. But normally I can tell pretty fast because my game will eventually crash when I run out of RAM. And every now and then I'll check to see if there is one. Because like the ones that are slower are a bit harder to find or harder to notice. But normally with the way I structure my code, I can find them decently fast by just turning on and off different sections of the code until I find out which section has the leak, and then it's not too bad. But I mean, yeah, you don't want to code in memory leaks intentionally. Have I thought about a video about covering all things hitboxes? So the thing about that is that I don't play with hitboxes as much as most people do, I feel like. I think most game developers care a lot more about hitboxes than I do. For me, 99% of the time I just use a rectangle. And if it's not a rectangle, I'm doing a distance check where it ends up being essentially circular hitboxes, but it's just just like a one-line check rather than actually having a hitbox circle. But some people go a lot more in depth. They'll do like per pixel hitboxes and stuff like that. I don't care to do things in that much detail. Actually, I did have pixel perfect hitboxes in Yanok. Not Yanok. Vagrant. I did that then. I think it was for the melee combat though. Yeah. So normally I don't care really. You just throw a rectangle on it and it's usually good enough. In pixel art, a lot of times the characters and stuff are naturally kind of boxy anyways, so a rectangle ends up fitting pretty well. So I don't really play with that too much. In this game, actually all the hitboxes are, I think, the distance checks rather than using rectangles, or almost all of them are, I think. And the reasoning for that is because since the game rotates, the hitboxes would feel inconsistent if they were anything other than circles, because like rectangles have corners, but the car is rotating, and the rectangles need to be axis aligned rather than like camera aligned, which means, or like car aligned. So I don't have a system for for rectangles that are at like angles where they're rotated. And also those types of checks are computationally more expensive as well. So doing a circle with a distance check is kind of ideal. So this is like kind of unusual in that sense. So do I just use collide rect between two rect objects? That's normally what I do, yeah. So like if you look in, well, you can't look in Yanok, but in Yanok, it's, I think pretty much all rectangles. There's a couple things where I do distance, but yeah, it's like usually rectangles or distance. Anyways, so I believe I was tracking the layer in the car here, and
And this is one of those things where I roughly remember where I put the code for this. I know it's in the P block. The P block would have to have the layer. I would assume it's copied into the car object. So the way the networking works is that there's the P block, which is the, what does the P even stand for? I think that stands for pignet. Anyways, the P block contains all the automatically networked fields, and then I was copying it into the car because you want the local copy so you can modify things locally without having it networked. Where is this? So let's look at the P block. Where did I put that? It should be net common blocks. So under car, I thought I had a layer. Oh, it's right here, layer, in one layer. So there should be a pblock.layer. There it is. So I use it for looking up the terrain, which is important. And so the question is, do I use it for rendering? And let's see, so not here. That's the portal stuff. So I don't. So what I need to do is go over to rendering, and it also needs to affect the sound coming from the other cars as well. So there's a couple different things that have to happen here. So most specifically, I need to check if, wait, hang on. I'm just going to create a property for this. So property def local layer self, and what I'll do is I'll return self dot, I think, do I use the pblock dot layer? Yeah, I think I do. If self dot pblock dot layer, block dot layer dot value is, and then from here I think this is, I can do, yeah, self dot e game dot car, oh wait, self dot car, well, e game dot car. So first, make sure that the game has a car assigned for the player, and then if it is assigned, check and see if this car's pblock.layer.value is the same as this current one. So if for this, like for whatever the object this is, if this happens to be the same one as the car, of course it'll be the same value. But then for the other cars, you also want to make sure it's on the same layer. And then if this if statement fails, that gives you none because it never hits the return. So it'll return none, which it will, in truth statements, equivalent to false. So this covers all my cases here. So I can just treat this as a Boolean, and as long as it evaluates true, then that means it's going to be visible. So now I just got to go over to, so here's the overlay. What is this? So here's the name stuff. So I don't need to do any of this stuff unless, so if self dot local layer, and actually, well, yeah, here's where I could use an and, but I don't really feel like it. That's another thing, is that sometimes it's just faster to not do an and. It depends. And so here's another one. Actually, I think it does make sense to do an and here, because the in the one above in render z, I did do an and already, so I can do that. But the another thing is, once you've got something like this, you would want to do put parentheses on there to clarify the ordering, which is some extra characters I have to type. What is this? Why is there two of these? Anyways, so and self.local layer. I suspect that this one might not be used. I'm not sure. Anyways, so visual effects should have a layer, like the spark should have a layer in theory. That's another one. Pretty much everything in that game should have a layer, which is the funny thing, because I don't do that.
Oh, that's something with the rockets, is the rockets need to have a layer. And actually that's probably what I'm going to spend my time on today, is just adding layer support for pretty much everything. Because before, the last time, I made it so that the layers work. You can drive through the course. I did not go much further than that. So the sparks will need layers, but I'll mess with that later. Play sound. I'm hoping this is what I used for all of the sound playing. If I did, then that means I can gate it right here. If not, then I've got a lot of work to do. So I think, well, since I have to go through here to play the sound, I can search for this and see if it appears in other places. So here's reserving channels, releasing channels, and playing. Okay, so fortunately, that means I can do if not muted and self.local layer. So that means that I won't be able to hear cards from other layers now. And is that what I need? So I think the only thing left is, well, can I bump cards from a different layer? That's an interesting one. Let's go ahead and see for that one. I'm curious. So we can, the server's already running. I can just start up some clients. Here we go. We'll mute that one. So what I have to do is I have to go to an intersection and try to make the players overlap. Also, I should notice that the actually, here's a, I'll try and split screen this. That's good enough. All right. Whoa, that doesn't. That's looking a bit laggy there. Okay, now it looks fine. I don't know what's going on. It looked a bit laggy at first there. Anyways, so there's an intersection right here. I'm gonna go over here just so I can make sure that the other thing I just did is working. So when I change layers, I should not be able to see the other car. Or hear it, but I've got one muted. Okay, so you can see the particles from me like driving around here, but you can't see the actual other car, which is good. All right, so there's an intersection up ahead, and I want to see if I can bump between layers. I'm gonna guess that I can. This is gonna be really weird to line up. Just gotta be like pixel perfect, and then I gotta drive around and look. Hello. The engine sound does not turn off when you're on a different layer, unfortunately. So that one's a bit annoying because that one starts playing at the beginning of the race and it's just on a loop. So there's nothing telling it to play again. So it doesn't hit that case, it's just permanently on the same layer. That one might be more annoying to fix because I have to proactively go and turn it off. Alright, so theoretically, somewhere around here there should be, there it is. Oh, and you can see the particles, so you can kind of line it up that way. But yeah, so that's something that needs to be fixed. So that one's an easy one. It would have been faster to just go and look and see if the code was there, but I don't know, it's more interesting if I do it like that. Where would the collisions be? So this would be called, presumably, so there's knockback from, that's, I need to look for not that. Bump sparks. I'm looking for the one where it's client initiated collision. Not just noticing that the other client said that they hit you. Where would this be? So presumably I'm looking for dot hit up. There it is. Right here. Oh yeah, so this is it. So go through all the cars, check it. So this is where the circular hitbox is. So it's a 14 pixel radius hitbox. And then it'll, yeah, it checks the radius and then knock them back. So for this, I need to say and self.local layer. Because realistically, I think this code only applies to the local, yeah, so the local player. Wait, no, I don't need local layer. That's the wrong one. I need car.local layer. So that's saying that the car that I'm colliding with is on the same layer as me. And then if that is true, then you can apply the collision. So that's how that will work. Now, what else is there? That's that part. So another thing was the sparks and particles. So the particles need to have layers added to them too. I'm gonna read chat real quick though. Question just popping by at the moment. Wanted to know if I was using a tick rate for my multiplayer or something else. So I'm actually, am I using a tick rate? I think I do for some things, but very few. So where's there's a main loop in here somewhere in the server code. Run. So I do have a tick rate, but it doesn't actually handle that many things in the tick rate. A lot of the information just immediately gets forwarded. So if a player tells the server it's like somewhere, then it'll immediately get forwarded and not wait until the next tick. So a lot of like the racing stuff is tickless. It doesn't have any ticks. It's done, it's processed immediately. And that keeps the latency as low as possible. Although that difference is not very noticeable because the because a lot of the players already have like 200, 300 ping to begin with, so it doesn't help that much. But there are some things that run on ticks, whatever this is. Mostly just management stuff. Handling laps and progress. So like, yeah, for example, the position in the race, like if you're in first or second and stuff like that, that's computed by the server, and then that will tell everyone. So I still have this code in here, really? It will tell everyone. So there is a tick on determining who's in first, but actually visually seeing the other players racing is not tick dependent. So realistically, actually, you could cross the finish line first. Actually, I don't know. I would have to look and see how the timing on the, well, how it applies the tick rate to winning the race, because it'll determine the ordering based on the positions and stuff. So I'm not sure if it'll look at who's the furthest across. There might be an edge case in there where you could actually cross the finish line first, but then lose because of the way the tick rate handles it. I don't know. There's some interesting stuff there that I don't care enough to look into, though. At least it's not a priority right now. This is all using Pygame. Sort of. There's also modern GL for like shaders and stuff, but mostly Pygame. And well, yes, that's Pygame CE too. I have a video about Pygame CE if you want to look. I've not used Kivy. I think Kivy is mostly for mobile stuff. I don't do tick with rollback for the car movement. Why would I do rollback? Rollback is more for fighting games, I think. No, I just forward the data immediately. Actually, I think a lot of racing games do have some amount of prediction. I think they just have essentially dead reckoning, and so they might try to position the players more realistically, and just kind of put them in advance of wherever their position is because of based on their like angle and speed and stuff like that. Although it starts looking a little bit jumpy when they suddenly turn or something like that. So that's the most stable in games that are more realistic about driving, where you can't turn super fast. Whereas in a game like this, even more so than something like Mario Kart, you can like hop around, spin in circles, and I guess the way to say it is that your position is not very stable or predictable. If I try to, based on current state, predict what the other player should see the player as, it will oftentimes be very incorrect. So, and then it'll look like people are teleporting around a lot, which I don't like. I prefer just having the latency in there and then all the movement looking smooth. Now that does create some side effects when it comes to bumping players, where especially when there are people that have like 300 ping trying to bump each other, you get some really weird results. So like the versions of the game that different players see in this are actually quite different because everyone has a different combination of latencies that they're dealing with. It's not peer-to-peer, but so I guess in a sense it is. Well, the reason it's different is because your local player will be ahead by a certain amount depending on your ping. So it'll be somewhat similar to what other people of your ping also see, except with the exception of yourself. But yeah, so that's how I decided to handle that. It's meant to be a more casual game, so I'm not trying to make the positions as up to date as possible. And by up to date, I mean you're trying to predict based on old data. You do rollback with spaceship movement. You can have people moving with 200 latency with all movement locally being instant. When you say, wait. When you say the car/player forwards, do you mean forward input? No, I mean forward the position. The server can validate that. I haven't put that code in yet, but the server can validate to make sure that the actions the players are taking are valid. But the or the movement of the car is valid. And but no, I'm not forwarding inputs. That doesn't really work for anything where you press a key and you move. Because having, especially for people in other countries, having 200 ping on moving, like visually locally, is terrible. The only time it's kind of acceptable is when you've got the movement where you like click a spot, and like MMOs and MOBAs do this, where you click a spot and then your character walks to it. But if you're having to like hold keys constantly to move, then the latency feels absolutely terrible. So any game like that kind of has to have local movement. But yeah. No, it doesn't really cause hacking issues because you can validate it with the server, so you can like put speed checks on it and stuff like that. Now, the extent to which I would do that, there is a trade-off there, because I might want to try to keep my servers lightweight, because the more validation I put on that, the more the server has to look at different things, like maybe, like for example, if I want there to be walls that you can't just drive through, then I have to have the server simulating the physics as well. So there's a trade-off there, but it's not. The client itself is not necessarily authoritative. There's validation. the way my framework works is that any data that comes in before it gets forwarded, or actually no, I'm not sure about this version, but at least the newer version, the way it works, the one I'm using for my other game, where the networking framework's name is actually ShopNet. That one, I actually have a layer it goes through where the server specifically has a check to block, like a section where you can write a function to block data coming in based on the validity of it. So it's not inherently client authoritative. And I don't remember what the current setup is for Pixkartz, but I can add that in pretty easily. It's just like a networking framework thing, but yeah, so I'm not a fan of like fully server authoritative games, because it's also more expensive to run. Like, because I mentioned that even with a client where you can run things locally, if you want anti-cheat, you have to simulate that on the server. If you want it to be server authoritative fully, where the client is just sending inputs, then the server has to handle a ton of stuff. So I mentioned kind of a case for this in my last video, where, for example, the way I handled projectiles, instead of having the server handle the physics for every single projectile that the players shoot, I have the players tell the server when their projectile hit, and then what I'll do is I can check from the server and say, okay, where mathematically should this projectile have been, and does it actually hit this entity? So it only has to check once the client says to check. So it's not that the client's saying, well, right now it is that the client's telling the server, hey, this projectile hit this target. But the server doesn't have to every single tick check those things. It waits for the client, which is checking it, to tell the server to validate it. So that's actually less processing on the server. So that's one of the cool things you can do. And that's how actually handling a lot of things locally can save time. Like, for example, in this game, for collisions, the clients are the ones that tell the server when it collided with another car. And actually, this is one of the places you could technically hack, is that you could hack so that you phase through cars, except for the fact that they will attempt to bump you when you do that. But like, at least on your end, you could try and phase through cars, and it may be on their end because of latency, they didn't think they were inside you, then you just might not send that collision. So you could phase through cars in that sense. But yeah, so that mechanism is used in this game, sort of, where it tells the server about those collisions, so that the server doesn't have to be constantly running physics. I think for the anti-cheat, the place that I would most need to do physics would be walls, so that you can't drive through walls, and also the server already handles the void part, where you go into the void and then it teleports you back. So I can easily throw in some anti-cheat on that already. So it's just the walls and the speed. And another place that I don't care enough people hack on is, I guess, the ability to turn. It's like, oh no, someone just turned real sharp. Okay. Actually, that one would also not be, maybe I will put some anti-cheat there, because that's an easy one to check, because you just check the angle and it's like, can this car turn this fast? No? Okay. So there's lots of things you can do, and you can, with those basic checks, the hard one being walls, but like just speed, angle, and then especially if you can put in walls, you can, for a game like this, pretty much fully restrict the ability to hack, especially because I think the items are already handled by the server, so actually that is something where you kind of send your input to the server to use your item. I can't remember, maybe? I don't remember exactly how it works. If not, that's what I can change it to. But the driving part is the part that kind of needs the anti-cheat, and then as long as you can't do something like drive way faster than you're supposed to, or like drive like through walls and stuff like that, then there's not much you can do in the way of cheating that would negatively affect other players significantly. I mean, you could give yourself minor advantages, but it wouldn't be a huge deal. And at that point, you can just ban them. There is always a trade-off of like how much you want the server to calculate and stuff like that, with how open you are to like different levels of cheating. And like I said, there's the performance part of that too, where I don't want to be spending hundreds of dollars on servers. So yeah, this is meant to be a more casual game. How do I know whether to use the server for some stuff and the player for others? I mean, you just kind of have to think about it on a situational basis. So, I mean, you can just, you can intuitively think about it. It's like, would it feel bad if, like, so the things to think about are like, how does that feel to the player when they're playing the game? And like, how does that look to the players when other players are doing things? How much does that affect? How much does whatever solution you choose affect the cost of running servers? And then I guess finally, how does that whatever solution you use impact your ability or the ability to cheat? So. And then the way you would weigh those things varies as well, because on a casual game, it's not a huge issue if there's someone cheating, if it's not significantly affecting the gameplay of others. Like, so for example, in my last video, that game I was working on was PvE. So since the players are playing against the environment and it's more cooperative and they're like trading with each other and stuff like that, the things that would negatively affect other players is if they could just spawn items out of nothing, for example, or like if they can give them give themselves the best weapon in the game randomly or something like that. So that stuff needs to have the server controlling it. But if someone well, it would also look funny if someone like moved way too fast or something like that. But if someone does something like, for example, turns off their ability to take damage, that actually surprisingly does not affect the other players that much. Because they're not playing against each other, they're playing with each other. So it just becomes, oh, this person can beat the server run entities really easily, okay? Because even if you can do that, you're still restricted by, like, for example, if I just do something as simple as capping, doing anti-cheat on like your damage output and stuff like that, then you still have to have good weapons to beat enemies quickly, and you need to beat enemies to get items, and if you can't spawn items in, you still have to go and find all the enemies and stuff like that. So if you just like cap the damage output and movement, it doesn't matter if you can't take damage, because a lot of people actually aren't going to be dying to begin with. It's just kind of, you do have to dodge things and kind of take that into account. It gives you a bit of an advantage, but it doesn't negatively affect other players too much. And then if someone spots it, they can report that person, they get banned. And then like in terms of the game, since a lot of it's about like item collection and like crafting stuff and going to different places and getting hard to find items and stuff, a lot of those things are really easy to put anti-cheat against, so that someone can't just get everything they want really fast. So they're putting a lot of time into that account, even if they're cheating. So when they get caught and they get banned or whatever, then they still have to spend a lot of time trying to get back to where they were, even if they make another account or something. and the other players weren't really negatively affected. Maybe they're negatively affected in the sense that, okay, maybe this one player is making progress in the game, maybe twice as fast or something as the other players, but that's not that big of an issue, especially when the main interaction between players is, well, there's the co-op part where you're fighting enemies together, and then there's the more global part that affects everyone is the economy, and that's the thing that has to be under control. But yeah, so you can go game by game on that stuff. Am I planning on making another game? Well, I'm busy with 2 games right now, so I'm working on Pixkartz, and then I'm working on Yanok. If you need cheap servers, second-hand servers from Hetzner. I don't know where Hetzner is, but a lot of the cheap servers are, well, yeah, that's Germany. So, for example, I want American servers. Maybe I would have European servers for some things, but and actually Pixkartz I might have regional servers. I might set up like a European and an Asian one because it might not be too expensive. But I mostly want North American servers, and the problem with that is that there aren't very many cheap options in the U.S., and especially if you want quality. But I only pay like $10 a month for I could run several. I could handle hundreds of players on Pixkartz with like $10 a month in the U.S. still. So right now it's fairly cost effective. Anyways, let's go and add layers to the particles and sparks. So sparks are right here. We'll do layer equals 0. I'm assuming layer starts at 0. Self.layer equals layer. And then the layer should never change. So all you have to do, I'm actually going to add a layer property to the game that does the if self.char check. So at property def visible layer self, and then if self.char return self.char.pblock.layer.value. Otherwise, you just return 0, assuming you're on the 0th layer. And then I can use this attribute in other places like here and say, and actually, it's faster if I do it the other way around, because the way I think in Python the way it works is if you got an and, it evaluates the first case first, and it actually won't check the second one if it doesn't need to. And collide point is going to be more computationally expensive than checking if the layer is correct. So you can actually filter out a lot of those stuff for increased performance if you do the layer first. So it's funny how stuff like that works. So just writing a statement this way instead of the other way around can save a fair bit of performance. In some cases, it can be a lot of performance. In this case, it's not going to be too much because there's not too many sparks. So if self.egame.visible layer is self.layer. So now the other thing that happens with that is I have to go and add sparks to everything. Now I'm not going to be able to test the negative case on this too easily because it's not really an easy way to make sparks without items and without. I guess I could do a 3-player thing where you do 2 players collide on one layer and then another player's on a different layer but in the same position, so you can see. That's the way to test it, but I'm just not going to bother. I'll notice it later if it's not working correctly. But I will test a positive case to make sure that the sparks still appear, though. Anyways, so what I have to do now is I have to search for all the instances where I create sparks and assign a layer. I think all of the sparks come from cars. So sparks, spark. So all I have to do here is layer equals self.pblock.layer.value,
and I just gotta copy that into pretty much everything. So it's gonna be in a bunch of, why? Oh, it appears twice. So I'm gonna do this and it'll filter it down a bit so there's less cases to go through here. That's not correct, there. And then we could do that, and we'll do that. All right. Oh, I don't like the space. That's not the same formatting I've been using. So we go back through. Things like that will very much annoy me. I don't use parameters are the one case where I'll oftentimes take out spaces. I have a weird formatting I use for how where I put spaces and different things in Python. So like if you look at something like this, I almost always have spaces. But then if you look in parameters, I'll do the equals without a space. I think PEP might recommend that to a degree, but I think in some cases PEP might actually encourage doing things like that. I'm not sure. I can't remember if it says anything about that. Anyways, so the spark should be on the correct layers now, so let's go ahead and start up the game. So the test case for this is to drive to another layer and then see if the two cars can bump into each other and create some sparks. Another case, I think, oh, I forgot I can create sparks by drifting, which means I can actually see if there's a car on another layer that's creating sparks or not. So all I gotta do is sit right here, and then if I'm driving right here and let's say I drift, I didn't see any sparks there on, oh well, I can't see my other screen here, but I didn't see any sparks on the other client. Anyways, so I'm gonna go meet the cars together, or bring them together, and then we'll see if the sparks appear when they're on the same layer, and they should. Well, there's that. Yeah, so I saw the sparks there, so that's all good. Now we have to do particles. So the particles are the other thing. Fortunately, there's not too many things I have to do this for. There will be other entities as well. I'll have to do like the rockets and stuff, but I won't be able to see that until I actually add the item boxes to this map. And that's another thing, is that I need to make it so the entities in the map, so like if I place a chicken or something like that, that needs to have a layer. Any blocks I place need to have a layer, that needs to be separated. So there's a lot of work needs to be done in adding layers to the level editor, because this is not my main level editor that I use for most of my games. It works a bit differently, so that feature needs to be added. Alright. So yeah, this needs layers as well. I'm going to do layer equals 0, and then self.layer equals layer. What is my preferred game resolution, and do I scale up from a smaller base resolution? I'll work with any resolution that scales into 1080p. Like it scales by an integer factor. So basically that means that every pixel is like going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4 pixels when scaled up. So I don't want it to be like 1.5, where some of the pixels are too wide and some of them are 1. So I have to be careful about that stuff. But other than that, I don't care too much. Generally, I work in the scales where it's like you do 3 or 4 times or something like that to get to 1080p. It is important to note though, so the game windows seem small here, but that's partially because I'm on a 1440p monitor. So it is a bit bigger than it might seem. And well, these windows are already resizable as well, so you can scale it to whatever you want. if cost and performance are an issue, why not use something like C# isn't as hard as C++ or Rust, but more performant in Python. So here's the other thing with cost is that you have to factor in how much cost you're putting into creating the code that you're running your game with. And especially when you can do other things to make money. So time is money. You don't want to be spending 3 times as long to write the code for a game to get the same result that just runs faster, just to save, I don't know, $20 a month, $10-20 a month on servers. So that becomes useful in larger scales when maybe, well, for something like Pixkartz, it would have to be more than thousands of players. Like, look, I think maybe you'd be looking at, probably 5 digits before I would care what language my servers were written in. It's like 10,000 players. Is probably when I would care whether or not my servers are written in Python. But like for now, and probably like I don't see a reason why I would have 10,000 players. So Pixkartz is perfectly fine to be running on Python. I can already handle more players than most people that are making servers with like C++ and stuff anyways. So it's not much of a benefit there. And also in a more authoritative server results in you having to write more code on the server as well. So you've got, to me, it usually ends up being more code to do things like that. So if your server is lightweight and doing basic anti-cheat stuff, that's just, to me, in a lot of cases is the ideal. It takes the least code. It's fairly lightweight on the server. And like I said, since it's the least code, you're not spending too much time working on it. And for me, it's like, my server costs are probably going to be the equivalent of me working my job for, I don't know, 10 minutes. My server costs per month are going to be equivalent to working for like 10 minutes. So in the span of a year, you're talking about 2 hours? So if I'm having to spend more than a couple hours to cut down on those server costs, and remember, they wouldn't be going all the way down, they'd be going down by some fraction, then it's not worth it. Now, something to keep in mind though is that a lot of games it is where it's like you pay for a $10 server or $20 server or whatever, and you can only handle 10 to 30 players or something like that. So I'm already on a scale where it's very efficient because I can handle like 100. So how do I come up with my game design? Do I just doodle the prototype image in paper and then try to pixelate it? No, not like that. I mean, I think about the gameplay first. I don't think about the artwork first. Now whether it's platformer, like a side view or top down, that aspect of the visual style matters. But normally the visuals is something I'll play with later. So I think about the gameplay and try to get a gameplay loop working in my head. Ensure that there's not like a way that the player can abuse it to the point where the system is not fun to play in. So like I can't think of any good examples right now, but like there are game designs where it's like, oh, there's this fun mechanic you can play with, but then when you try and turn it into a game, there's this one obvious exploit that you can't really work around, where if the player's playing optimally, they should do this like one exploit that you can't really prevent because of fundamental game design issues. So it's like avoiding things like that. Now for specific ideas for games, in game jams, I got started with working with themes, and when you have a theme that's restricting what you can work with, it's almost easier to come up with ideas because you're thinking about that one theme and anything that relates to it, and you just are running through a bunch of different things.
Whereas if you're more open-ended, it's a bit more difficult. Well, Yanok came out of like kind of a game jam as well. There was a theme, and the theme was Strange Machines. And then to me, Strange Machines became Cellular Automata. So then I turned that into a game. So that's where that game idea came from. And I mean, most of the games that, the only game that I've released, I think, that did not have there's a couple, I guess. The only games that I've released on like itch.io or Steam, I guess, that did not have a theme that I got the game idea from was Super Potato, actually. Because Drawn Down Abyss came from, here, let me show you. So I made... Where is it? So Super Potato is the only one that didn't have a theme. Drawn Down Abyss, actually, even though it was made on its own, it wasn't made for Game Jam, it was based on a theme because it was based on this game. I took this game and then turned this into a bigger game. But this was made for a Ludum Dare, whereas the theme for this one was actually just mixing a bunch of genres together, which was funny. But I thought that this game worked out pretty well. People liked the gameplay, so I turned it into a bigger game. And let's see if I can remember. Was this one Floating Islands? What was this one? Or was it like farming or something? Does it say? Whatever the 48th Ludum Dare was. It's like farming or something. I don't know what it was. What was this one? Was the theme for this one Floating Islands? I don't know. This one, the theme was alchemy. I think this one was ancient artifacts or something. Was the theme. This one was growth. So the island grows around you. What was this one? Oh, this one I think it was like spellcasting or something actually. So a lot of them actually have kind of the theme in the name. What was this one? What was Ludum Dare 40? Man, Ludum Dare 40 was a long time ago. So, what was 40? The more you have, the worse it is. Is that really 40? I'm not sure how that relates to this. Oh, it's because you're collecting crystals and like, yeah, okay, it's built into the story. That was kind of one of my less interesting uses of a theme. What was this one? Oh, this one is you can't see everything. So it's literally the ninja goes invisible. So rather than the player not being able to see everything, it was that the enemies weren't supposed to be able to see you. So that was a fun one. Yeah, this one's mixing genres. What was that one? What was Bouncy Shots? Does it actually say? It's just a 6 hour jam, whatever the theme was for that. Mop was cartography. I don't remember what line his theme was. Shifting Edge. What was that one? I can't remember that one either. Spike Dungeon's theme was falling, so the idea is you drop down different layers. It's kind of like Downwell, but not. Arrow Blaster was I forgot what the exact theme was, but the implementation of the theme was that the world wrapped around, so if you kept falling, it would wrap and you would go back up to the top. Cave-In, I can't remember either, but there was definitely a theme. Gleam Shroom, man, I can't remember the themes anymore. I think this one had the theme had something to do with time. I can't remember. Why can't I remember the themes for these things? What was Moon Rabbit Collection's theme? Well, this one was made for a Ludum Dare. Oh, wait, Hue Flowing didn't have a theme. It says Hue Flowing and Super Potato Bro didn't have themes.
but everything else had themes. So that's kind of like my starting point for anything that I actually release. What was it? So this is, oh yeah, the theme was delivery. So you're delivering items. But yeah, so hue flowing, although this is one of my favorites, which is funny because this is just an idea that popped in my head, but normally my ideas come from themes. The fact that I've been making games for 10 years and I've only released like 2 serious games that that weren't based on a theme is kind of telling. So that's a good place to start, is game jams. And I think I'll probably get back more into game jams again when I'm done with like Yanok and Pixkartz. Oh, I guess Pixkartz also doesn't have a theme, but that's not out yet. So that's 3. And Pixkartz is very intentionally based on something else, obviously. So it didn't really need a theme there. Wasn't doing anything particularly original. So yeah, I really do think game jams are a good way to get experience, get ideas, and stuff like that. So, and I if I want to make another, even, like another Steam game after Yanok, I might just go back and take one of my game jam ideas and expand on it. I have like 20 of them that I can work with. So, I don't know. I just really like game jams, so I recommend trying it out if you've got the time. How do I handle multiple enemies in my game? I mean, you can do like a list, just throw them all into a list, iterate through them, call an update function on all of them, call a render function on all of them. That's kind of how I do it normally. You can try to organize it so you can look them up by region by doing like, well, the traditional method is quad trees, but I don't like the tree part, so I just do quads. So there's different options there. Normally, depending on the number of enemies you've got, you can just throw them all into the list and you're fine. If you're not having performance issues, it's usually, or like you're not having issues writing code, you're probably doing it fine for your use case. To me, code quality is not something you have to worry about too much unless you can see, well, maybe you might not have the knowledge to know that maybe the way you're doing something is causing you problems. But as long as you can tell if the way you're writing something is causing you problems, and you're seeing that it's not causing problems, then it's usually fine. Because normally writing nicer code means taking a lot more time, so. Do I use ECS? No. Anyways, so this particle thing, I need to enforce this layer here. So we throw an and in here and we say and self.e game.layer, or visible layer, what it was the thing, is self.layer. So that makes sure that we can only see particles on our layer, and then we want to go over to so copy that. Is that everything I need? Yeah. We do particle and we search for all the cases where we create particles, which is not that many. And we'll fireball. Oof. I'm going to leave this one. This is like a one-off case, and I know the only case where we create fireball is going to be on layer 0, so I can leave it as is. It's a keyword argument with the defaults to 0, so I can leave that one. This one is going to depend on the layer of the rocket. So I'm going to have to do this one later. But it'll have to copy the layer of the rocket. But this one I can do. So this is the dust on the ground when you're driving. So layer equals self.pblock.layer.value. And that is that. Now, Here, let me start up the game again. And we should see that the dirt particles are no longer going to be visible if you're on a different layer. And then that just leaves, I think, the rockets and like the different like entities that kind of the server can see. So I just have to add the layer attribute to those later. So I'm going to drive around here, and I should not be able to see the dust particles. I muted both of them. Oops. Alright, so if I sit here, and if I'm driving around here, I don't see any particles on the left one, which means I'm good. But if as soon as I go over here and I start driving, you can see the particles on both screens, which means that the layers are working properly there. So the only thing left now is going to be the other entities. So we're talking about like rockets and stuff like that. So those are going to need layers. Thoughts on Pygame? I don't use it. It's too much overhead. So the Pygame is like OpenGL, basically. It's based on OpenGL. So things take more steps for rendering and everything. So there's a reason I don't use OpenGL for most of my rendering. Even in Yanok, when I use OpenGL or modern GL with OpenGL too, for shaders, I do most of my rendering for most things you see in the game, so the world and every like players, the HUD, everything, are in Pygame, and then I just pass that as a texture to run shaders on. So when you're dealing with the GPU, I think there's more overhead. So I'm not a huge fan of using Pygame. I think there are applications where you might want to use it, but from Gamedev, for me, because of the way I make games, it's more convenient to use Pygame. Now, that's not to say that all games would be better off with Pygame. There are definitely games where you'd be better off with Pygame. So you can look into that and try that if you want. Yeah. Although I'm going to need to take a quick break. I'll be back in like a couple minutes. So I'll say 12:47 p.m. ET. All right, I'll be right back.
Alright, I'm back. Do I use Pygame or Pygame CE? Pygame CE, there's a reason I have a video about it. Oh yeah, the description from Davy Dash is pretty accurate on how I normally handle enemies, I guess. The idea of global access for everything, but also things scoped so that you're not accidentally accessing things, is probably the most relatively unique idea that I use in how I structure my code. Does Pygame CE also include my shader trick? No. That's just inherent to Pygame itself. You can turn on OpenGL rendering, and then what happens is you have to, at that point, you can't just blit to the screen anymore. You have to have OpenGL like render calls done in order to show anything. So what happens is you pass your surface as a texture to OpenGL, which will then render it and put it on your screen. So when you're in that mode, Pygame is just handling the input and the sound and the window and stuff like that. But you can still, a lot of people use it just to use OpenGL for all the rendering, but you can still do stuff with surfaces and memory, and you're just sending that as a texture to OpenGL later, which is what I'm doing. So yeah, mine's like a weird hybrid approach that not many people use for game dev. What technique do I use for animation? I have a video about that, so it's one of my oldest videos. You can look at that. I still use that same technique. I mean, I've made I guess the system more. What's the word? I can't think of the word. We can do more things than what's in that video, but it's fundamentally the same idea. Anyways, so the hazard things need to be handled. So the hazards, I think they're done straight out of the networked collection, which means that they don't have a local object necessarily. I think they just use the data that's automatically networked, which means to have them on layers, what I would have to do is go into here and then add them in here. So there's track entity, that needs a layer. We've got the moving hazard, and is that it? The item box needs it too. So the item box, hazard, track entity, moving hazard, they all need the layer. So all I gotta do is grab this field here. I think this takes unlimited arguments. Yeah. So we'll just do that. I think it defaults to 0. So do that in there. Throw that in there. Put that in here. Fortunately, this doesn't need to be interpolated or anything, so it doesn't need the moving double field that needs all the extra configuration. So we can put that there too for the moving hazard. So now all of the network objects have a layer attribute. So the next thing is to make sure that they're on the correct layer. So for the hazards that are created when the players use items, all I have to do is, I think the server spawns that. So what I have to do is make it so the server looks at the player's layer when they create that hazard. Unfortunately, I won't be able to test that because the item boxes are not on this track yet. And this track is the only one that has multiple layers. Later there's going to be more, but for now there's just this one. Yeah, so we've got our layers there, and then so in the server, I don't know where the code would be. There's some code for using items in the server somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. I think it might be handled kind of as an event. Wait. Oh, so here's all the player items, if the players used it, and then if item IDs and cone and spill, then we want to create a normal hazard, but then if it's a missile or the blue missile, you want to create a moving hazard. So here's where these are created. So all I have to do is say new hazard.layer.update, and then we set it to the why am I calling int right there? Anyways, car dot layer dot value. I think that's what it is. So that will just copy the car's layer over to the hazard, and now I do the same on the missile. So that's a moving hazard. So that's two of them. I think there were 4 things I just updated the layer thing for. So I did it for item box. Oh, track entity. This is another one. So track entity is going to have to pull it from the level data, as well as the item box, which means that the level editor is going to need to be able to have layers in it. So right now I'm going to test to make sure that the game still works even with those new layers that are being set. Well, also I need to filter over here. So let's do that first. So let's filter here. I need to go through the rendering, wherever these things are rendered. Where is the rendering? Is this the rendering? Oh, here it is. So you don't want to do any of this stuff if you're not on the same layer. Oh, so it's an entity, so it's a fireball entity that spawns this thing. So I literally I should be copying it from here. So layer equals, and then it should be entity.layer.value. That was interesting. All right. So now I need to filter this so that the layer, so they need to always be updated. Oh, wait, hang on. This is the this is not the fireball spawner, this is the fireball itself. So the fireball's already going to be on a layer, though. I think it's considered a moving hazard. No, oh wait, no, it's a track entity, right? I'm surprised I didn't make it as a moving hazard. That's funny. Anyways, so this, I think, is this just the rendering? No, because I handle the collision right here. So it's an update and a render. So what I have to do is I have to gate this part right here, but not the other half. So if entity.layer.value is self.visibleLayer, then you can do all this rendering stuff. But we don't want to gate this stuff over here. And we don't want to call the, even though this is an if statement right here, we don't want this part to be called because that's the actual render call. So yeah, we want that nested right there. Anyways, item box, here's another one. So the rendering parts are right here. Do I need this box stat thing? No, it's just for rendering. So I can do if, and then it's gonna be the same thing. So box.layer.value is self.visibleLayer. Then you can do your rendering, and then you do the same thing over for the hazard and the moving hazard. This one looks like it's just a render. I think the hazard part, like the collision, is handled actually in the car. So this is a bit of spaghetti. This whole game is a big pile of spaghetti actually, because like I mentioned, it did get a lot bigger than I originally intended. I was treating this kind of as a fun side project that maybe I'd make a couple tracks for and forget about, but I'm ending up taking this a lot further. Although I don't have a whole lot more to do with the code, so at this point the spaghetti actually isn't that much of a problem. Most of the code for this game is already done. I think the things that are remaining are probably like menus and some polish, and I need to add a bunch of items technically, but most of the stuff is there. So this layers thing is the last big change that I have to make, and it's not, if you've been watching, it's not been too tedious to actually do this. Yeah. Anyways, so this one I can do an and then throw hazard.layer.value is self.visible layer, and then I can do the same thing over here. It's also named hazard on this one, so I can actually just copy that. And now all I have to do is check to make sure that the boxes, the hazard, the moving hazard still appear on normal tracks, I guess. That's the way I can test this for now, in the track entity as well. So if I go on a track like Moo Moo, I can see if this is working properly. So let's start up the game. I do have to, actually I should restart the server first. Hang on. So let's kill the server and restart the server. Now we start the game, because I need to pick the track. And for those of you that haven't seen this game for whatever reason, you will finally get to see some actual, more completed map. Here, let me get the other one. I'm gonna mute the left one here. So the audio is coming from this right one. Alright, so I'm gonna put this one ahead. First I gotta make sure, so the item boxes are there, that's a good sign. I should also be able to still use items. There's the chickens, I should be able to hit them, that's good. And then I should be able to see the oil spills and hit them as well. That's another one. So I can drop that there. So that already covers 3, provided that the other player can see the oil spill. That's 3 of the cases. So there's the chickens. And if I can see and hit the oil spill, we're good. All right. So now what I need to find is I need to find a rocket because the moving hazard has not been checked. Give me a rocket, please. Yes. All right. So if I go back here and if I use the rocket, that still works. All right. So it all works. Now I don't know if the actual filtering of the layering is working correctly. I wrote the code that makes it look like it should work. So I would think that once I actually add the layering, or the ability to layer those entities, like have those layers set by the level data, then it should in theory work immediately. Now, adding the layer support to the level editor is going to be a bigger task. Where's that? It's right here. Right. So let's see if this loads in. All right, here's the current situation. This is not going to look pretty because this is the work in progress map where there's no artwork yet and it's just terrain. So all these checkpoints need to have layers in it. The whole map, like if I want to place tiles like this or something like that, that needs to be on a layer instead of just in a location. So it needs to become essentially 3-dimensional, sort of. The data will be. Not that I guess in game it sort of is 3-dimensional, but it's in a different way. Checkpoints need to have layers associated with them so that I can do some stuff with that. I also need the layer support just so I can see the different track images, because right now this looks confusing. I mean, yeah, you can't, and this is why there's some issues with the checkpoints right now, is because you got like this thing going on where they're crossing over each other, and the game doesn't really know what's going on because it doesn't know the difference between layers and checkpoints. So yeah, the next thing is to update this level editors, because there's a whole section of track I can't see here because this is only showing one of the layers right now. So that has to be changed. And then I have to add layers there, add support to the layers in the level data itself, and then load it into game, update the network objects with that layer data, and then that should hopefully work immediately. Then after that, I gotta add the item boxes so I can actually test things like the rockets and stuff on this map. And then finally after that, I can, or actually probably around the same time, I'll do like the checkpoints to make sure that they're working, like the code for them is correct for handling edge cases with layers. So there's a fair bit of stuff to do there still, but then after that I can finally go and do the artwork for this track. I'm hoping that maybe next time I'm working on this game, probably maybe like next week or something. Wait, no, I'm not going to be able to stream next week. But next time I work on the game, I'll be able to finish up all the layer stuff. And then, so probably 3 Pixkartz streams away from finishing this track. And then actually after this track, there's going to be a playtest so people can finally play the game again. Because there's been a few playtests already, but it's been a while since I've had one, so there's going to be a lot of new tracks. I think there's going to be, is it 3 new tracks? Yeah. And then lots of quality of life improvements and other stuff. So, yeah. Maybe loading quad data can be hard for some people. Yeah, that's why most of the time lists are fine. Unless you're doing like an open world game, you can usually throw all your enemies into a list, and it'll usually be performant enough as long as you don't have like a ton of them. For a lot of stuff in Yanok, though, I think I've switched to like for example the off-grid tiles. I'm using quads. The animation system is really annoying to do, so you made a modular class to handle it and just use the same thing in every project. Well, I mean, that's how you're supposed to do it, is you create one animation system and then you use it for everything. Did I ever use Pygame.stl2 video features? This is the feature set that is hardware accelerated. Last time I checked, that was not documented, but then also I don't need it for performance, and so I just really don't have much of a use for it at the moment. I might look into it a bit, but right now my setup with modern GL and Pygame mixed together works pretty well, so I don't have a reason to really look into it. You heard that SDL3 is the thing now. You wonder if Pygame's going to update it again. Yeah, I saw that. It was like, was it just earlier this year they decided they're going to start working on SDL3? I'm curious to see what they do with that. It's probably going to be more hardware accelerated than prior versions. So I'm curious to see what happens there. Yeah. Well, anyways, it's been almost 2 hours, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. Thanks for watching. I guess I'll see you guys in hopefully 2 weeks. Bye.